This is Wild Nevadacast. I'm Dave Santina from the studio of PBS Reno in Reno, Nevada. Thank you for checking in with us. We've done a lot of ghost town visits over the years in Wild Nevada. We've seen quite a few, but certainly not all of them. And I think it's a pretty lofty goal to try to see them all. And we have somebody with us today who may end up seeing every single one of them before it's over. We have Tami Force. You might know her as nvtami.com, or that's her website. You may have read her articles in Nevada Magazine. You may have seen her on social media, which is at nvtami, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and then you may have listened to her radio show, which is on Radio Goldfield.
Radio Goldfield, yes.
And soon you'll be able to read a book by Tami because you're in the middle of writing a book as well. So you've got so much going on, and this isn't even your regular gig. You got
it is now. It's turned into this is what
it's what you do now.
I do, and I love it.
Well, it's
I have
incredible.
the best job in the world next to you.
No, you get to go out. I'm here now. I'm not. I don't think you want to do this job as much as the stuff you're doing.
No,
you're
I want to
go out and explore. Yeah. But I came across your website originally a while ago when I was just researching for Wild Nevada, and then for this podcast, just looking for people who I'd want to talk to, and I thought, well, wow, what a fascinating story. You wrote your story, sort of a little synopsis of your life in there and how it relates to your travels. And it started back when you were in Idaho just learning to drive, right?
14 and a half. It's an Idaho thing. I had my first car. I was learning to drive in the snow and going to ghost towns. 1983 Pontiac Grand Prix.
Wow.
My Rubicon's a little more... better fit for what I do now. Yeah, I took that car a lot of places.
I think so. I must say, it is kind of shocking sometimes what a vehicle can do, even if you don't think it's made for it. Because you're talking about a Grand Prix, the first, maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years of Wild Nevada, we were in a white minivan, a Mercury Villager.
I remember that van.
We're driving a Mercury Villager in places where a Mercury Villager was not designed to go, and it was great. It held up amazingly well. And then the first time we had an SUV, we got a flat tire.
Yeah, I was shocked by that van, but that, like I said, went everywhere.
It did. It was kind of amazing. And that was, the good old days.
Yeah. But that being said, I'll keep the Rubicon instead.
I suspect so. And one of the things I thought was cool about what I read that you had written on your website was you talked about getting to drive at a little bit younger than people today, or at least in this area, get to drive. But the magic of having a vehicle, you had made a reference to that, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, the freedom.
Yeah,
I think things have changed now that I have a little different perspective. I have a teenage daughter learning to drive.
Me too, and it changes. Yeah, it changes a lot.
Scary, but yeah, for me it was always freedom, and that's for my parents. I got good grades in school, but everything, if they wanted me to do anything, it was all held over the car. But I remember them just begging them to take me to Silver City, which is outside Nampa. So that was my first ghost town. And then, when we took driver's ed, going to Idaho City and different places.
That's cool.
And then I was out, unbelievably taking that Pontiac Grand Prix places. My mom, now she'll know, but places she didn't know quite where I was going on that. But yeah, it was just the freedom of being out and wherever. So I grew up outside of Nampa, but wherever I was in college or my undergraduate out in southeast Idaho, when I moved back to Boise for graduate school and trained in Oregon, wherever we moved, I was out exploring something. There's always history you could find. There's always something to do.
Yeah. And then you move here, you get married, you're here.
Yeah, married a third generation Nevada ranch boy.
So many more possible places to explore. And you went out with a copy of Stan Pear's Ghost Town book.
That's what started it.
And it launches this entire life, focus. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's so when we had our first trip, I was 27, and I'm like, let's go to Vegas. And my husband had done some training there. He's like, we're not going to Vegas. So we went to Barnes & Noble, and I found Stan Pear's book. And so we planned our first vacation was going to ghost towns. And then as our kids got older, I was dragging them. We did trips across Nevada. We rented a trailer one time. I'm not a trailer person, but
right.
So we were always taking them places. And I ended up meeting Stan later, several years later. The one time I didn't have his book with me.
Oh, funny. Yeah, so we should mention, just for those who are not familiar, Stan Pear sort of the ghost town guy, right, for the state of Nevada. He sort of literally wrote the book.
He literally wrote the book.
Plural books on ghost towns in the state.
Multiple. Yeah, we call him the godfather of ghost towns. And I'm fortunate that it went from I met him again, got my book signed,
Nice.
and then that now he's become my mentor. And he told me a while ago, he's like, I'm passing you the torch. That he's like, I know I'm getting older, not going to be out. And he's like, you and a couple others are the ones that are taking over documenting and preserving the history on these ghost towns. And so I get to go camping and exploring with him. And
Wow. What an honor!
I love
to
it.
Be,
It is such an honor.
You have been proclaimed the carrier of the torch, right? Did he
I'm
put
waiting
a
for the
sword on
torch.
either side of your shoulders, or maybe a
Well, we kind of did a
what
little.
do you do? Flashlight? I don't know what you do for.
We did a little
ghost hunting.
campfire thing when we were out camping at Shermantown.
A little ceremony.
Hamilton. Yeah, we had a little ceremony. So, and he's been a huge mentor and support, and of course influence in what I do.
Yeah.
So, and he's just absolutely the nicest person.
And yeah, I mean, generally, I think the ghost towners have always been really nice, pleasant people. I've only met a few, but I've always had a great experience with them. And I'll say this, as someone who would not, in his spare time, necessarily choose to go out into the desert looking for ghost towns, the people who have the passion for it transfer that to me when I'm with them. Like I understand it, makes it come alive to be with someone who feels it. And I wanted to ask you, what is it about ghost towns? What is it that pulls you in?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. Like, so, I mean, here I go back, and actually, my family was kind of old Californian, so we used to go over and explore the Gold Country a lot, and I always wanted to be out. And I think for me, it's the influence of people. And there's a debate on what's a ghost town. That's a whole nother topic.
I actually had made a note to talk about that
good.
because ghost towns.
What seeded that? So yeah. So what is a ghost town? But I think what I like, and so my background's actually, I'm a clinical social worker. I'm a psychotherapist. Not practicing. Or maybe I'm reformed. It's the influence that you had. People that had their hopes and their dreams about whether it was emigrating across the country or prospecting for a mine or finding a new town, and you look at what they created, and then it's gone.
Right.
I like the kind of the unknown towns, but I was recently at Rhyolite, and I usually don't write about the big towns, but like you look at that, and within a 5-year period, it went from nothing, not having water, not having anything, to having swimming pools and operas, and then within 5 years, it was gone.
It's crazy. They're like shooting stars, right? They're nothing, then they're bright and brilliant, and then they're gone, and there's just residue left, if anything. Sometimes there's nothing left.
Yeah, and a lot of times people expect that it's going to be something like Bodie or Rhyolite, and I love those towns. Don't get me wrong, but for the most part, a lot of times there's almost always something left, unless it's been taken over by mine or new development. But what we usually find are like rock foundations or debris. So we don't find a lot of the big, beautiful buildings. Nevada, if nothing else, has a lot of rocks.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of rock structures left. But a lot of the wood structures they either didn't have or they moved them.
Right. Yeah.
And the mills, they would just move everything.
That's one thing that I learned from this show, doing Wild Nevada trips to some of these ghost towns with knowledgeable people. They talked about, well, there's no wood here because at the time they would just take the things with them that they needed to go to the next town. These boom and bust places, they take the wood from the house and they'd go build the next house with it. So they just moved it along. And so the pieces that are left behind are the pieces that were hard or they either could replace or didn't want to move. And that makes sense when you're standing there thinking about it. Otherwise, I would not even have, it wouldn't have occurred to me that that's what happened. And that's a lifestyle that is so alien to me that I find it fascinating and off-putting. I mean, these people were way tougher than me.
Oh, they were, and it's amazing that what they built out of nothing. And but I look at the towns. It's like, why do people live? It's not like now where we might move to be close to our family or for recreation opportunities, or the environment. Is people were there primarily for mining. Supporting the transportation. Pony Express Railroad was another reason, agriculture. But people weren't there because it was a great community. They were there primarily to mine. And when that was gone, there was no reason to be there.
Yeah, that was the only reason that they lived there in the first place, was the opportunity. Yeah,
exactly.
So that's we tend to have some more luxury in some of our choices. Some of us, not everybody, but for many people, it's just completely alien concept. And so I'm one of them, where I never had that situation in my life. So I realized that what that must have been like to have to go someplace, because that's the only option if you want to survive. I respect that. Yeah. That's a whole different world from what I grew up in. So these ghost towns represent a lot of different people having, and many different stories, right? From
I think a lot of hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
So a lot of disappointment.
I bet. Yeah.
But then there's good times. What I love I really like the unknown sights, the unknown stories. And I've evolved from when I first started my midlife goal. A lot of my friends, they bought sports cars and bought heels and took dance classes. I bought the Rubicon and Packer boots and went into the desert. But as I started visiting them, at first I had I think a couple books. And I would just document off Stan's books and a couple others. And then that's grown down to, I think, 5 bookcases in the online resources.
Wow.
But I had a big change when I got newspapers.com. And because you think social media now, the newspapers were the social media, and they wrote about everything. If somebody was in town, someone was sick, of course, the mines, but it's the people stories.
It's true.
And that's what I found I love. And my friends I go out with, like I do a lot with Nevada Expeditions, he calls them Tami stories. And he'll be like, what ghost town do you want to go to? But I'll find a story. He's like, this is a Tami story. The miner who wants to go to the saloon and tries to make his dogs into sled dogs. That didn't turn out so well.
No, I bet not.
Or the Christmas turkey that he was trying to bring home and feed everybody that flew out the window. So I found that's what I love is the people. And whether that's my background, or I think most people in the ghost towns are males, so maybe it's being female. But I love the people stories, and I think that's what makes history is the people who are living the lives there. And the newspapers are just full of, like I said, a lot of times poignant. A lot of course, negative things, a lot of murders.
And the writing style was, you mentioned poignant. The writing style was often much more, I would say, of a different quality than what you see these days. There was a little more, I think, personal touch sometimes when it was about someone dying, or it was like a memorial. They were eulogizing people in their own stories.
They have so much information in them. And usually, I just looked into Mona Bell. And I wouldn't have actually researched her necessarily because the story's been told.
Well, I'm not familiar, so what's the basics about Mona Bell?
The truth or the legend?
Well, let's start with the legend, because that's always fun to hear first.
Yeah, the legend. And so it was Rhyolite's most famous murder. And I was writing about Rhyolite, and I had to have a Tami story. So I thought, I'm going to look up a murder, because that's what I need is a good murder. And so I popped up Mona Bell. It turns out the murder was fairly well known.
In Rhyolite, it was well known?
It was known in Rhyolite and through the state.
Okay.
I mean, the newspapers reported stories. We didn't have that many newspapers, but they report stories from around. So the legend is that she was a prostitute that moved to Rhyolite, and her pimp murdered her.
Uh-huh.
And that she was buried in Rhyolite, and people go see the grave, and they leave shoes and booze bottles and
trinkets
to her.
Okay.
So I was putting together the Rhyolite piece. I'm like, well, I want to look into what happened. So I dove into the old newspapers. And there's a lot of grains of truth in the story. She was a prostitute from what the old newspaper said. She'd been married, met a man who had been in prison several times. He'd murdered his brother-in-law, escaped prison twice. Initially, the first time he came down on a rope down the outside of the jail right to the waiting deputy. The second time, he turned himself in after a month and said he wanted to go fishing.
Okay.
And he was gone. So she met him and moved. They moved around. They kind of left a trail of a lot of issues with the law. I think stealing money from one of her clients, and they got out of that one. But then he punched the judge.
Oh.
So that didn't go over so well.
It's never a good idea.
It's probably not a good idea, especially back then. And so she went to Rhyolite to raise money for his bail.
Oh, okay.
And so I dug into his history and then to what happened. She was, they were both married to other people. And he did murder her.
That part was true.
That part is true. Sadly, she was a prostitute. She and a friend had just opened a different saloon. Some people say she was trying to better herself.
Okay.
I'm not one to put a judgment on, because I wasn't there.
Of course.
On why she did that, but she was opening a business, and they murdered her. Well, her ex-husband came to town, claimed the body, and took it to her family in Washington. It wasn't until much later that one of the caretakers thought this was a great story. She'd heard about the legend of Mona Bell's murder, and so she built a grave. And that is what the grave has become, that people will go visit it and pay tribute. And then some of the people who did the paranormal stuff, they'll, go to commune with her. And it's just it's a tribute to her.
Sure. Well, that's fun. That's some of the stories that come out of these ghost towns that are so fascinating. I love that's a Tami story. I think that's great.
That's a Tami story. Yes.
That you found that story and written about it. Your writings are on your website, of course. Nevada Magazine. You write articles for them as well.
I have
right?
several articles in Nevada Magazine.
Yeah, and then obviously you have a social media presence. How did that all kick in? Because we mentioned just before we started recording that you didn't expect
plan on
that was going to be a thing, and here you are, and Tami on Instagram, and I don't know if you're on Facebook and others.
I do, primarily Facebook.
Yeah, okay.
I think when like I said, my goal was to go to all the ghost towns, and I wasn't ready to write a book at the time, and so I decided what to do, and so I started the website, and I thought, well, if I build a great website with content, they will come.
You're right.
And they didn't.
And they did not.
And they did not. So I started social media as really an adjunct to get people to my website. And so I would share a new article, and still I write about a new article a week, and I would share that once a week. But what I noticed is that people liked more rather than the story. They liked that, hey, yesterday, I just got back from hiking to the Lost City and some other ghost towns, and they liked that. So it really pushed me to go out more, to have content, and then I found like the people liked the travel side of it, and saying, "Hey, we stopped by the bar at Middlegate for a burger."
Yes.
And so, I didn't intend social media to really be the primary piece,
right?
But I spend a lot of time on social media, both on my website, and then there's a couple of the larger groups that I'm either a moderator or a group expert in.
Okay, so social media has really become like the primary communication between you and the people who are following you.
I think, and I never thought it. I mean, it's not what I intended to do. And I have to say, when I started social media, I thought, I have to be prepared for negative comments,
right.
and you hear all the bad stuff, and it is so rare that I have that. I have like you said, the ghost towners, but the Alfred community and the history community is wonderful. And I love my followers and become friends with a lot of them. And they're just a great group.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned off-roaders. This whole departure from your old life to this has enabled you to become much more than just an explorer. You are sort of you're a helper. You have gear. You have a full rig that you go in and assist people, right? You're part of this group of people who will pull over when you're on the side of the road and help you if you're stuck, right?
Yeah. With the snow today coming in, maybe it's good that I didn't have the Rubicon, although I probably would have stopped and helped people up the road. So it's certainly a different education than what I had before. And I love especially rural Nevada. And people are like, oh, do you camp or do you have these big places? It's like, no, you go to Austin and, head south 100 miles and that's where I am. But you need to be self-sufficient in that. So yeah. I think I'd always definitely been a little bit of that, growing up in the country. But so I started learning skills on off-roading and recovery classes, self-recovery and helping other people. And
recovery from a situation in the wilderness where you're stuck, or what is it? When you say recovery, is that a broad term?
No, I mean, and that's exactly. So self-recovery is if you get stuck, how do you get out?
Got it. Okay.
And then also recovering other vehicles. And so I carry a lot. I can never have a two-door Rubicon. I carry a lot of emergency space. I have extracted people who their vehicles are stuck. I have fed them. I have dressed them. I've had water. I've had first aid kits. So that's a lot of my training has been first aid and, like I said, off-road and recovery, and just because you have to depend. And I love the law enforcement services out in rural Nevada, but it could take a significant amount of time for them to get to you.
Yeah, there aren't that many of them, and they're going long distances.
Long ways, yeah. And people say, well, don't you worry about being out in the in some of these small towns in the middle of nowhere. Right. And for the most part, I worry more about being in town. Like I said, the people I have met, like I said, not just the off-road community, out places, they're the nicest people, and they're there to help you. Right, that's true. I have much more limited experience from doing the show, but absolutely, you're not going to see somebody who drives by if you're stuck who doesn't stop to say, "Hey, do you need a hand?" Yeah, nope, they're going to stop.
Yeah, they're always going to stop.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm wondering. For someone who's watching, listening, who doesn't yet have a rig or is thinking about going out and exploring a little bit, but is not really familiar with it, what are the must-haves? Like what do people need to make sure they have with them in their vehicle?
Yeah. And so recently I wrote an article. I had somebody who was upset with me because I didn't warn them that it wasn't Disneyland. So it was actually a spite article that I wrote, but I'm glad I did. And it was about, here's the things that I carry, and here's the things I have. Number one would be communication. And Nevada is rural, and there's a lot of places, even on the freeways, you can't get a signal out, a cell phone signal. So I carry a Garmin satellite. So if I have a sliver of sky, I can get a message out. So that would be one of the first things, is communications, letting somebody know where you're going. And we've had a case recently where a couple was out and no one knew where to start looking, and they were fortunate they were able to get out. So communication, water is a must. I modified my tailgate. I always carry 5 gallons of water and 5 gallons of gas because there's not a lot of gas stations. Right. So then the basic survival. Always have shelter. I carry a small tent with me, always having food, medications. I have some emergency medications I carry with me. Yeah.
And you mentioned...
I think you need, how I think about it is, if it's 72 hours before someone finds you, what do you need?
So at least have enough to get you through 72 hours.
Yeah. I could probably be out of my Jeep for about a week, along with helping all the other people who didn't carry everything with them.
Has that happened? Have you come across people who need help out for, in a place like, 100 miles south of Austin, or, just really out in the boonies?
Yeah, I've come across some people who have been stuck, or more I've been out with a group, because that's one of the big things, is taking several vehicles. So that way if something happens with one vehicle, because it does, you have an issue. And like if you have to recover with a winch, one thing Nevada doesn't have in a lot of places is a conveniently located anchor point.
I was going to say big, heavy tree with
We don't
deep
have
roots.
a lot of big, heavy trees.
Yeah.
So having a second vehicle is great for extraction. So I think more of the people I've helped, or people I've been out, I carry the same gear year round. I have snowshoes year round in my Jeep, and I have a jacket year round. And so I've had some friends that I've dressed. I've fed a lot of people. So I think it's more that with the groups I've been with. I don't go with a lot of large groups, but so I think that's more what I've encountered, fortunately. But there are a lot of people who, there have been people, sadly, who they go out and they're not prepared.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we get a story or two a year, it seems, maybe more, of people who went out too far, got lost, were a little too comfortable, a little too confident.
Yeah.
And then, that's awful.
Things happen.
Yeah. You got to be.
And you need to be prepared. So if I had one piece, communication would be.
Makes sense.
Would be my number one.
So what are your favorite ghost towns after all this touring? Do you have favorites? Or do you are they all kind of unique?
They're all unique.
Okay.
I have places. I don't guide trips. I do donate a couple trips. I guide some off-road groups going out. but each one has a different piece, and I love the stories. But so if I had somebody going out who's new, I live in Carson Valley, but Pine Grove is one of my favorites, and I've done a lot of preservation work with cleaning that up and preserving it.
Where is that?
Groups. It's south of Yerington, Mason Valley.
Okay.
It's not too difficult to reach. They do. That being said, there are some washouts. I have people say, why don't you give directions, and one that's to protect sites, because the people who work for them protect them. And I can't keep up road conditions. I mean, I know some spots out Jefferson, out in the center of the state. I was there with Stan Pear, and I think a week later, was it Hurricane Hillary came through, and I don't think you can get a dirt bike up the road within a week. So, but yeah, Pine Grove would be one of my favorites because you have the school, the boarding house. It's fun. I have pictures on my site and others the historic photos of them, and so that's always fun to recreate. So that would be one.
Nice.
I take a lot of people into Masonic and Chemung, which are down out of Bridgeport. I kind of consider anything east of the Sierra is Nevada.
Fair enough.
Should be Nevada. So I'll go down there. Yeah. Out of here, Tunnel Camp's really popular. A day trip out of Reno,
okay,
and Humboldt City. But I love them all.
Right.
And I'm easily entertained.
Right. Now, and do you prefer the more, I don't want to say remote, or I guess I'm thinking the more the ones with the least remaining, or because there are some that are pretty solid that a lot of people already know about, that they'll visit. Bodie is one that people obviously know about, and that seems to
great
be like
one to start
the
with.
First one, if you're,
it's a gateway. It's a gateway ghost town. It's a gateway drug.
There you go. That's a good way to put it. So if you're not sure what you think about going to ghost towns, try that one.
And that you have state rangers there. It's a state park. It's a graded road. It's a washboard, but it's a graded road. And so that's a great place to start. I mean, it's, I think, the most popular ghost town in the United States.
Right, and fairly complete. And yes, technically it's in California, but as you said, it's on the east side of the Sierra, so you could say it's Nevada if you want.
At one time, a lot of that area they thought was Nevada. It was Aurora. So, yeah, so I think those are great places to start. I don't love the ones necessarily because they have nothing there. I like the unknown ones. I mean, Bodie's been photographed. It's been documented.
Right. If I even know about it, it's pretty well known.
I just wrote about Hector Station, which was on the stage station between Lundy and Bodie. I don't think that's anywhere else out there. And so I love the unknown. I have, like my friend, like I said, Nevada Expeditions loves finding the places. I love finding the stories and the finding about the stagecoach robbery that happened there.
Nice. So what's a place that you, if there is a place that you still want to go to that you haven't been to yet?
I knocked a lot out last year. My son moved down south, so I've been. In fact, I just got back like about 12 hours ago.
Oh. So you've been busy.
Yeah, you can't see the bruises under.
You're presenting
the bruises
well.
underneath. Thank you. So I've knocked out a lot of that. I know this year, Black Rock, going out and like the Emigrant Trails. There were not a lot of ghost towns up there, but a lot of the Emigrant Trails. And then I'm going to be going down to the Taibo Railroad Valley area. I haven't, as I've gotten and explored farther out, I'm spending more time in eastern Nevada, which I haven't been able to do a lot. And so that's where I'm trying to, like last year I did a multi-day trip in Elko and one in Ely. And then I've done some down south at a Pioche, and I love those towns.
So you're checking off the list one at a time.
I am, but I used to worry I'd run out of towns, but I keep adding. The more places you look, it's like, oh, there was a ghost town here. And then you find out there was another settlement, or there was another camp, or there was some other. There's always more.
There's always another one.
Yeah.
Well, then you can do this forever, and you can write about it. You can write about it for your another book. You've got a book that's about to come out. I was going to ask you what's coming up for you, and you had mentioned that you're about to release a book, and you're maybe thinking about another one down the road, right?
Yeah. The first book is In the Shadow of the Sierra, and it's about the ghost towns and historic sites on the Eastern Sierra, and it goes from Susanville to down to Kern County with a tiny little bit of San Bernardino. And it's just all the sites I visited. It's a coffee table book, so it's some fun stories.
Lots of
when
big
I can.
photos, big pictures.
Lots of photos, a little bit of information. The next book that book, Stan Pear's doing the final content edit.
Of course.
So I was ready for it to come out, and he's like, I want to do the final edit for you. So I'm just waiting on him.
Nice.
And so we expect that, that'll be out this year. And then the next book is Beyond Bodie. And I'm doing a deep dive into Mono County and finding all these unknown hot springs and stage stations and mining camps. And so it'll be about a 25-mile radius around Bodie. Still pictures on each site, but more information, more in depth.
So we have that to look forward to. We're recording this in the middle of February 2025, within this calendar year, I would assume.
On that one, I had such a big push last year for the other book that I feel I didn't get to do the in-depth research, which I love.
Gotcha.
So I think on that book, I'm going to more take my time. I think stories tell me they need to be written when they need to be written.
Right. So in the shadow of the Sierra this year.
That's this year.
And then we'll look
down the road. Beyond Bodie's going to be beyond that.
We'll look beyond Bodie. Fair enough. Fair enough. We didn't even get to your radio show on Radio Goldfield, let's have you come back another time and let's talk about more stuff.
Yeah, I would love that.
Let's talk about more stuff because you have an endless resource here of material.
I have a lot going on.
You've got a lot going on, I want to say thank you for coming in today and giving me the time. This is great.
Yeah.
And hopefully people are able to go and check you out. So all these places they can find you: nvtami.com, on social media at MVTami on Facebook and Instagram, correct?
I think if you look up Nevada Tami, or my website name is Nevada Ghost Towns and Beyond. You'd find me on. I'm on Facebook all the time, and I try to get back to everybody who comments, messages. Some magically disappear in the Facebook abyss, but I always try to get back to anybody who contacts me.
Good. Okay, and then look at Nevada Magazine for future articles, maybe.
Maybe if they're interested in Radio Gold. I never thought I'd have a radio show, but
every week. Real quick, what's the schedule for your radio show?
It airs, I think, about the 1 o'clock hour midweek is their kind of the story hour, and I'm at the top of that. And it's just it's like 5 or 10 minutes.
Fun.
A different one every week.
Nice.
So and I'm just recorded, I think, episode 57.
Well done. And you can stream Radio Goldfield online.
Correct.
So
that's what I do.
Just search Radio Goldfield, at any of your favorite search engines, and you will find it. And then you can listen to Tami do her story.
And it's a fun station.
It is fun.
It's Nevada's quirky.
One of these days,
station.
I'll do a show with them because that's a great.
Oh, you should.
It's a great listen as you're driving through what you feel like is the middle of nowhere, and you've got some tremendous content. So yes, we'll get to Radio Goldfield. Maybe we'll have you come back with them and talk about that.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. So before we go, I want to remind everybody to watch Wild Nevada on PBS Reno via broadcast or streaming at pbsreno.org and any other streaming sources. Also, watch segments on PBS Reno's YouTube channel. And if you have a question about Wild Nevada or maybe a comment or a suggestion, send them to me at podcasts@pbsreno.org. My thanks to Tami Force, and thank you for listening to Wild Nevadacast.